Good afternoon. My name is J.C. Harp. I'm pastor of Independence First United Methodist Church, Independence, Missouri. And this is August 7th, midweek Meanderings in Scripture. It's the 10th Sunday coming up after Pentecost, and it's great weather this week, and it's just enjoyable and just makes you feel good and look forward to all the things that God's doing. Our scripture out of Matthew, the 14th chapter, continuing to work through Matthew, verses 22 through 33 is the reading, but we're not going to read the whole thing. We'll read just verses 22 through 27. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost," and they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And then skipping to the last verse for the reading, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Well, the context of this passage of Scripture that is so cool is that Jesus has just fed the 5,000. One of my favorite scriptures, because he just kind of puts it to his disciples and says, "You give them something to eat," and they just kind of, in John's Gospel, the 6th chapter, they just go bonkers. What? Where? How? And so Jesus just kind of expects us to step out in faith and make a difference. That's kind of it. But so we have this miracle of 5,000, and in the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Mark and the Gospel of John, it is followed by Jesus walking on the water. And so he feeds the 5,000, then he goes off to pray, and the disciples go out. And the lake is not very big. It's several miles wide. John's Gospel says they were 4 miles in the middle of the night, 3 to 6 a.m. So it would be an eerie time. They're used to being on the water, fishing all night, but not traveling all night. They're fishing at night, and Jesus comes walking to them on the sea. Their first response is, when they see Jesus walking on the sea, is fear, anxiety, stress. Their first thought by somebody is it is a ghost, or it's a spirit, literally. Whoever or whatever this is not human. It's not natural. It has to be supernatural. Jesus sees them and says, "Take heart. Do not be afraid." So we have a clue right there as to the meaning of the scripture. We have these two stories that are kind of double miracles, kind of tied together. And this is what we could call a theophany, or God appearance, God making presence. Theo, God, epiphany, appearance, God revealing God's self to them. And whenever God shows up in the Bible, in the entire context of the Bible, people are afraid. They're scared, they're afraid, because they are meeting the holy and they're unholy. They're meeting the pure and they're impure. They're meeting the beautiful and they are not. And God's response has always been to encourage them to take heart. Don't be afraid. That's a clue. That's exactly what Jesus. They think they see a spiritual, supernatural being, an angel, a ghost. And Jesus responds as God. Take heart. Do not be afraid. It is I. That's the English translation. The Greek translation literally says, ego eimi, or literally, I am. Take heart, I am. It is I am. Now the translation here, skeptics would say, well, he's just saying who he is. He's just identifying. And yes, that's one way of answering a telephone. Hey, am I speaking to JC? I am he. I am. It is I. So it would be doing that. But it's doing so much more because we're talking about biblically in this context, in Jewish writings, I am was not used. That is the divine name. It is the ultimate theophany when God appeared to Moses in the burning bush and Moses said, who are you? Who am I to say sent me? And I am. I am the sending God. I am. When we bring the whole Bible context together, the walking on water, the very unusual, the theophany language of take heart, have courage, do not be afraid, and then the language, I am. This is a theophany. This is Jesus revealing who he is through what he does and how he acts and interrelates with people. We have two miracles of divine revelation. And the final reaction of the disciples, truly, you are the Son of God, gives us our answer. So what does all this mean for us on August 7th, 2020, in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of social injustice issues that we're trying to resolve? I think first it means that Jesus is God. Our focus as a Christian church is always on Jesus. And yes, Jesus is human. And yes, Jesus walks with us. And yes, Jesus is our friend. And he comforts us. But Jesus is also God. This man walking with us is God, the great I am of the entire Bible, the creating God, the sending God. This is Jesus who is with us. I think second, it means that Jesus attends to our needs. He feeds the 5,000. He attends to our necessities. But Jesus also comes to us in the storms of life, pandemics and racial injustice and economic injustice. And he comforts and he heals. He gives guidance and he gives hope and he sends. God is creating and God is sending. Jesus is with us. Take heart. I love that language. Take heart. Be strong. Pick up the heart zapper and zap your heart, and kind of get that shock awake. Zap that faith heart. Kick it in gear. Both for us personally, as focusing on our life and on our faith, but for those of us who are sent into the world, which is all of us, we go with Christ, who walks on water, who reveals, I am. Heard a great challenge this week in just looking online. And the challenge came, and it was simple. He says, every one of us is called to bring people to church. Do the easy thing. Bring someone you know that belongs in church back to church this year. Someone either in your family or in your circle of friends that you know used to go to church, no longer goes to church, but should go to church. Bring them back to church. If every one of us brings one person back, how big a difference will that make in all those people's lives as they reconnect to their God and they find sustenance and strength? Maybe it's not back to the same church, but get them back to a place where they're fed and nurtured and encouraged by God. What a huge difference that'd be. Each one of us bring one person back to church this year. That is my challenge for us this week. May the peace of God be with you. Take heart. Do not be afraid. It is Jesus, the great I am.